Now, I have to ask you, how many of you does this look familiar with? Pulling that boulder up the hill when you're the business owner where you're feeling alone is all too common. And again, this is where coaching comes in. We work with owners to gain perspective and to rethink about how they allocate their resources. Just know that it's normal to feel like you're pulling that boulder up the hill, especially when you're in the learning phase. But if you personally are pulling that boulder up the hill during the growth phase, you're limiting the growth of your business. So now let's talk about how to recognize it and what to do. But before I get to that, it's probably helpful to say it's not a mystery where businesses start to fail. So this study was done by the Corporate Executive Board of 50 businesses that had deemed themselves to be stalling. Corporate Executive Board is now part of Gartner. And when they studied the 50 businesses, the key takeaway from this very admittedly busy slide is that only 13% of the factors that stall growth are external, things like the economy or government regulation. 87% are completely controllable. And I've highlighted the top 4, and I realized that the print was small. So the top 4 are things like your brand starts to diminish. You start slowing your innovation. You stop introducing new products or looking for better ways to serve your customers. Think digital automation and how that's transforming all of your businesses. You abandon your core market too early. That's where customer satisfaction and loyalty issues start happening. So you have to pay attention to your existing customers as you move to grow into your other ones. Now, those are all strategic things at the top, but at the bottom, about 17% of the factors that impact stalled business are management things, organizational issues. And the number one thing is developing your team. So today we're going to focus primarily on the growth stage again. So I'm going to have the rest of the conversation be more about the trap when the owner either fails to invest or delegate in the beginning, or invest more in the business when there's a growth, where there's an opportunity to grow the business rather than hand that growth opportunity over to a competitor. These ideas are from a very popular coaching book written by Michael Gerber. Michael was a great entrepreneur, and he's in his book writes about all his successes and all his failures. So you have the advantage of reading books like this and working with your coaches of sidestepping common traps that are so predictable. So let's talk a little bit about those. Now we're going to talk about the 3 I's of the business owner, which is the heart of today's presentation. The first perspective is that of the entrepreneur. Notice how the eye is looking forward and hopefully a little bit upward, working on the business. This is a perspective that drives growth and builds equity when you want to sell. Looking forward is out into external factors like the economy, like new customer trends, where your competition's at, anticipating changing customer preferences, merging preferences in terms of digital technology, and meeting your customer where they're at, strategic positioning of your company, hiring the right people and building the right culture. The second perspective is that of a manager. And you notice that the manager's perspective is looking backwards. So a lot of this is looking at reports, monitoring what's happened to make adjustments to make your business work better going forward. It's also doing things like hiring and training the staff, but it's more reactive to the business. It's more keeping up with the growth that's coming at you. So in my right-at-home businesses, on the strategy side, what we started doing is spending more time building partnerships with the right companies that can refer us hundreds of customers, rather than just focusing on one-on-one things. We're focusing on hiring professional managers who can hire and develop caregivers so that we can focus on building and acquiring other territories and creating better working environments so that we attract better people. And likewise, on the management side, it's things like handling the payroll and things. So just to put things in perspective of the examples of the tactical tasks that happens at these levels. The last perspective, and by far the one we spend the most time in, no matter if we run a business, is the role of the technician. Where do the technician eyes look? Now, those eyes do look a lot like mine. And it's because the technician is working in the business. It's doing the business. A lot of times when we create a business, if it's a software business, the founder's writing the software or selling the software on a day-to-day basis. In our healthcare business, from time to time, we have to care for an elderly patient because a caregiver doesn't show up or because we haven't hired enough people. It's hard to align demand with supply. So the nature of the business, this is what they're talking about when you hear the phrase, you're working in the business, not on the business. The in the business sustains you for that moment, but sometimes takes away your time to focus on the things that will enable growth in the future. So the question I would ask you is, how much time in the technician role do you spend on your business? And I'm going to encourage you, if you're watching this, to just make an estimate of what percentage of your time you spend working in the technician role, doing the selling, answering the phone, doing payroll, doing the functions of things that can have other people do. Mark, do you shout out if you get any answers?
Sure, Charlie, nothing yet. So, but yeah, folks, there's no right or wrong answer here. So throw out, what do you think you might spend in your technician role? And I'll read out any of the percentages. Lori says about 90%.
Yep. Well, Lori, thank you for
sales is what Lori then goes on to say.
Well, to be truthful, in my first year as a FocalPoint coach, same thing for me. I spend all my time networking and getting to know people, and of course, delivering the work of serving my clients. So it's not unusual. So when FocalPoint regularly does this exercise, this is one of our favorite power principles for success for clients. And normally when we conduct this, the average will be something like 80% of the time from the people in the room is spent on technician role. Although in my experience, a lot of times when I start with a client who's just entering the growth phase, they're spending 90 or 95%. They're just keeping the business alive, and they're working 70 hours a week, and they've got concerns about their health and other issues. 15% is a common estimate of how much time people spend managing and looking backwards and doing the core day-to-day of managing the staff. So only 5% of the time is spent being the entrepreneur. Now, I want to take you back to the slide of the causes of stagnation. The top 3 were all strategic: letting your brand atrophy, failing to innovate, failing to find a new way to serve your clients. That's where you're getting to the top of the curve and the growth is slowing. So that's why it's important to spend more of your time allocated towards the entrepreneurial role. And that, of course, is what we do as coaches at FocalPoint, is we work with you to find strategies of offloading the work that some of you find drudgery. Like for me, it's doing accounting. And this is where I've started integrating virtual assistants into my life, people who are passionate and detail-oriented, where I'm a big idea guy. They come in and they manage my invoices. And then what that's done is that's freed up more time for me to do public speaking, things that I love, writing articles and journals and filming things, which is really where I get my joy and my energy.